Hello and welcome everyone to another quick review. Today I'm covering the recently released Metroid Dread. It was released 2 days ago as of this recording on Friday, October 8th, over here. And I just want to give you my quick thoughts on this game, on the basic mechanics. I've only played about 2 hours of it. Nothing crazy, so it's not going to be in-depth, but this is more of a review for just the basic mechanics of the game. Is it fun? Should you buy it? Is it worth it? And if you like this review, I can give a more in-depth analysis of the game later down the road after I've finished more of it, preferably all of it, if you guys do like this video. But with that being said, let's just get started right away with the graphics of the game, which I think look awesome. They're really great. They don't push the Switch's hardware in any way, but they definitely do look very sharp and crisp. I'm playing still on the regular Switch. I did not get the OLED model. In either way, I played it all on docked mode, and I don't have an OLED TV anyway, so that doesn't end up mattering. But it still does look very good. All the different environments look quite distinct from each other. They use lots of variants of colors, like there's a big lava pool you run by in one area, then you run into these really frigid areas which are really well designed, and all of the like underground metal bunkers and stuff look really different and distinct from like the caves where you can see wildlife kind of running around in the background. I really like that. And so all of the environments together combine to make the world really immersive. You really do feel like you're running around on this planet, and I think that the game definitely succeeds in terms of its graphical ambitions. And in terms of, well, it's also not very demanding on the console, because it is just a 2D, like, Metroidvania. So it's not going to push the console to its limits like a game like Breath of the Wild or Odyssey, say, but it does have lesser ambitions and succeed very well with that. In terms of the mechanics, I'll start with combat. It's pretty simplistic. You've got your blaster, you've got the missiles, and you get more attacks like a charge beam later down the line, and you've also got like a melee counter that you can directly counter enemies' attacks and blast them into oblivion with. And overall, so far at the point I am in the game, that's all you have in terms of your moves. But I think even though the combat is pretty simplistic, it is fun, right? Like, there's definitely, like, it's like if in Mario with the fireballs, right? Like, it's obviously a little bit more in terms of detail when you compare it to something like that, but it is definitely, like, it's more simplistic than, say, a Breath of the Wild with all types of different weapons and attacks and combat methods. It's more of just you always have a method to defeat enemies with, and you have multiple simple options to do so. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. And the bosses and the enemies you fight, there's definitely different types of variation in terms of the regular enemies that you fight, so that's very good. And the bosses are also very fun. The bosses are a very good test of both your movement ability and your combat ability, which I really like. I'll talk about movement in a little bit, but I think the bosses definitely do a good job of kind of testing everything you've been practicing up until that point in terms of combat and movement. So you definitely need to make sure you're brushed up on every single thing that you've been doing up until that point in the game. So let's just go move into movement, if you will. This is one area where I'm not super, I don't like it as much as all of the other stuff I've talked about so far. I feel like it's not as snappy as it could be. Like, when you wall jump specifically, they can be a little finicky in terms of when you have to flick the stick. Samus almost feels a little too loose. Maybe it's just because I've gone from playing like Mario platform games with like with a D-pad to like a full control stick, but I don't know if I love the movement physics as much as I like the combat. It is like I feel like it's not, like, Samus runs pretty slowly, in my opinion. Like, it's not as slow as, say, a Mario run, like, as his regular walking speed, but it's not quite as fast as his regular sprint. So I feel like if there was some way to kind of control Samus's speed, at least at this point, that would be good, but it doesn't seem like that's as big of a concern in terms of, because the game does seem to be a little bit more combat focused rather than platforming focused, but the platforming in the game is pretty fun. It's not like in terms of cleverness of the actual platforming challenges, it's not a dedicated platformer. It's got other things going for it in terms of the gameplay, but the platforming is fun. It's challenging enough, but it's not super clever like Mario games. It's not super well designed like that. It's just kind of more of an obstacle as opposed to the central focus of the game, which obviously it isn't the central focus of the game. However, I do think when you combine the combat and the movement, it is more it does make it more bearable, because you're not only testing your combat ability or your platforming ability. You have to be aware of both things at once. So you have to do a couple of tricky jumps while also avoiding an enemy, which I'll talk about in a second. And you also have to kind of blast things and get away, or use your movement techniques like a slide to get under a platform and then quickly dodge an attack and fire back. So those things are good. So I do think when you combine everything that the game offers in terms of gameplay, it's very good, especially when you add in the fact that you're basically navigating a giant dungeon. There's a lot of pathways and rooms that you have to go through, which when I first started the game, I didn't necessarily like, but now that I've started to play it more, I think it definitely adds to the more, like, you're running through a giant underground bunker, and I do like that. So I do like that in terms of the gameplay. So I think everything kind of comes together to form a much more cohesive experience in terms of a Metroid game. So it definitely feels like a different game than anything I've played before, just because of how everything kind of comes together. In terms of the story, it is pretty light. You get a couple cutscenes at the beginning, but it provides enough where you're immersed into the environment. So you definitely, like I said, with the world building and the graphics combined with the basic story you get, you definitely do feel like you're part of this environment. And especially when you get to the Emmy sections, those are the best parts of the game in my opinion, because it's probably the most dedicated platforming tests you'll get in this game. And even then, it's more about speed as opposed to precision with your platforming. So mistakes can be an issue. If you're not quite as precise with the platforming, you will get a game over. However, I do think this is where some of the platforming issues do kind of come to light here. So I think the issue with ledge grabbing, which I didn't mention earlier, definitely screwed me over a couple times in these sections. And the issues for the wall jumping also screwed me over a couple times in this Emmy section. However, when you enter the Emmy lair, if you will, the music that's in the background kind of all just fades, and you're left with just the ambient sounds, and it's super creepy, and I love it. It's the most immersive part of the game. You definitely do die a lot in this section, or you're probably going to, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It definitely makes it feel more realistic in terms of the tension surrounding this part. You really feel like you're kind of going into a place where you're not supposed to, and the danger of the Emmy itself definitely feels real when you're playing these specific sequences. So in terms of the immersion into that section, I think it's the best the game does in immersing you into the environment. Like, you really feel the tension of the environment, and you feel like you're the prey in this scenario. In most games, you're the predator, like you go and attack people, but in this scenario, you're avoiding the alpha dominant creature in your environment, which I really love. It's not something I've played much. It's not a mechanic I've experimented with in games that I've played, and I think it definitely feels unique and fresh. So props to the team for this specific section, because they're more frequent than, like, you do have to go through them a lot of the time, and because of the way they're placed, they're usually kind of in the middle of the environment that you're in, and you have to traverse through it, so it's not necessarily there's one more difficult section at the very end. It's like you kind of have to go through this very difficult maze all the time if you want to get to where you're going, because you have to pass between it. So I really like that, and I would always try to find solutions to the navigation, which is difficult, because if I'm trying to get around it without going in the Emmy lair, I have to either go roundabout, but then eventually I had to just grit my teeth and do it. I had to go for it, and I died a lot. So yeah, but overall, this is the best section of the game, and I think it's frequent enough where you will keep enjoying that tension of the Emmy, but infrequent enough where it's not annoying. Because the Emmy, I feel like if you're just constantly getting chased, it could be annoying, but it's infrequent enough where it's not annoying. So to conclude, I would like to just say, answer the question that I'm trying to answer in this review. Is it fun? And the answer to that is yes. And to kind of wrap it up, platforming and combat may not individually be superb, but they combine to form something really awesome, especially in the Emmy sections. I think that those sections are frequent enough where the game is brought up by it as opposed to brought down by its annoyance. And overall, I think this game is really fun. It's awesome. The mechanics work really well together. I definitely want to keep playing this game. It's not something I would put down. It's definitely number one on my I want to finish this list. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it. If you want to check it out and get it physically or buy it digitally, definitely highly recommend Metroid Dread. Definitely worth the wait. So that just about wraps up this review, and thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give a like, especially if you want to see a more full-length, in-detail review later down the line. Definitely let me know in the comments. But I think that's all I have for now, so I will see you next time.